Let's start. We are already a bit behind schedule, so that leaves for me another 2 minutes to do the open talk. Very good morning to you all. It's really wonderful to have you here. I see many friends and colleagues. It's wonderful that you could find the time to be with us today, which of course is a very important event for Circle, celebrating its 10th anniversary. Well, not today, but at least this year. So we are very pleased that we can organize an event like this. Of course, our first thought was, okay, let's organize a party, right? And what is good about the party is that all the good friends will come, and we can have a great time. But of course, we are also a kind of scientific institute. So we should also think about a program and the content of the program, and it should also be a bit scientific, right? So that's why we had in mind to organize something on the field of innovation studies and how we can more embed that in all kinds of policy thinking and all kinds of societal challenges we are confronted with almost on a daily basis in the media. Let's say the main rationale behind this conference really is about discussing more in detail what innovation studies as a research field have brought about, in what direction it has developed, and to what extent it is relevant for the type of societal challenges we will discuss today. And as you can see in the program, as you have all been informed about, is that we will try to concentrate on 3 big societal challenges in that respect. One is on recovering and even preventing the economic crisis, right? So it's a big question, of course, and I know that many of us are really dealing with these issues in terms of research, and it would be, I think, really great to see, okay, what is the current state of affairs in the field, and what type of research questions need still to be addressed in that respect. Also, we will talk about increasing globalization, because as any other country, Sweden is also confronted by globalization processes. And then, of course, the big question is how to confront that. Is it a threat, or can we also benefit from it, economically speaking, socially speaking, and to what extent innovation studies, research can really contribute to the further understanding of looking at that relationship between innovations on the one hand and the economic crisis on the other hand. Then the third societal challenge we would like to deal with is climate change. Of course, again, a very pressing social challenge. And many of us, also in innovation studies, are trying to do research and try to see to what extent transitions can be made, and what kind of preconditions and to what extent also policy can make an impact on that. And then the final panel we will organize today is more really about policy making and involving policy makers. To what extent really innovation study research can help them in dealing with those issues that are on the policy table on a daily basis, but also to hear from policymakers what they want from us in terms of the type of research we are doing. Are we doing a good job? Do we come up with all kinds of research recommendations that are really relevant and useful for them? And I sometimes wonder whether we are really doing a very good job in that respect. So in that sense, I think this fourth panel is really a very exciting one, and I'm very curious to hear what the contributions will be made in that. But of course, we start with an opening talk by the Vice-chancellor of Lund University, Professor Eriksson. But before I give him the floor, I would also like to pay your attention to a panel that will be held immediately after, which is on about Circle, because we celebrate our 10th anniversary and we really would like to inform you a bit about not only the history, but also the past and even more so the future of Circle. Is there any future for Circle, right? So question mark. So it's a very exciting question, of course, and me as the director, of course, is very keen on hearing what you have to say on that, and I will listen very carefully, indeed, what you have to say on that. But that, I think, will be an opening panel, and the really nice thing about organizing a panel like that is that we have all the previous directors present, and of course they have a lot to say on Circle, on its past, but also on its future. So, and last but not least, in that panel, we have a very distinguished guest present here today, Professor Meric Gertler, Vice-chancellor of Toronto University. So he is on a really big job, and we are so pleased that he found time to come over from Toronto and spend time together with us and contributing to this conference. So I'm really pleased, Meric, that you're part of this conference. So thanks again for doing that. But okay, also looking at the time schedule, I would like now to give the floor to Per Eriksson. It's really my pleasure to introduce him. As I said, Vice-chancellor of Lund University. And I'm very pleased that he will contribute to this conference and also give an opening speech. So please, Per, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see the growth of Circle. And I will also say a special welcome to my colleague from Toronto. And we are now developing cooperation strongly between Toronto and Lund University. And we think we have a lot of things to learn from you and your experience from the university in different disciplines, but also in the way you do innovations. And I'm very fond of Canada because it's on the border to US, so it always have to be competitive to US, but it has more value like we have in Europe, especially in Sweden. So I always feel very much welcome, and I have also been assessing some part of the instrument in Canada, for instance, a network of centers of excellence, and also the way they are working with more internationalizations and working with environment issues on energy and so on. So I think there's many reasons to improve and develop cooperation between Sweden and Canada, especially, of course, Lund University and Toronto University. So please, it's good to have you here, and you are also an honorary doctor of our university. Lund University is a fairly old one, and it was in fact the decision of the king, 1666. And the reason why the king started a university here was in fact that the king had conquered the Danish king and taken over this land, Skåne, Blekinge, Halland. And the old bishop, he was lobbying, so lobbying is not a new thing. He was lobbying to the king, Peter Winstrup. In fact, you can look at him, he's mummified and he's digged up now. He will have a real funeral. He had been buried in the cathedral, and we have taken some samples from him and see how he died. But that's another question. But he convinced the Swedish king that the most important thing to maintain this land Swedish was to build a university. And during that time, of course, the church were very strong link to the power system. So theology was very important. And that was one of the faculties. We had 4 faculties from the beginning: theology, medicine, law, and then philosophy. So that was the 4. And it was still 4 faculty to the middle of, I think, for a long time. For instance, when the inauguration of the White House, where of course the president lives, was 1882, Oscar II, and he gave the chain to the president of the university and the vice-chancellor, and then he was also the king of Sweden and Norway. So those were the days. But we had a task from the very beginning to keep this land Swedish, not going to Copenhagen to become priest. And if you see the motto of old motto of Lund University is to be prepared to do both. Ad ut rumque. There's a book in the left hand, but there's sword in the other one. So we was also prepared to be fighting. Today we have fulfilled our mission. There's still Swedish here, but we have a bridge to the Danes, and we have peace. We have been peace for more than 200 years, and we cooperate quite a lot. So our international airport is, of course, Copenhagen Airport. And today we say that we like Lund University to be a world-class university that works to understand, explain, and improve our world and human condition. What about world-class? Yeah. We are trying to get better and better, you know, all universities are ranked, you have to have a critical distance to this ranking system. But to be honest, we believe truly in QS. It's very reliable, and how do I say, base that that I believe in QS? Oh, that's because we are scoring highest on QS. We are number 60 on QS, so that's the reason why we believe very much in QS. We don't believe so much in Shanghai ranking, because we are below 100. And the reason why we are below 100 in Shanghai ranking, it's because our Nobel laureates have a very bad habit. They do the breakthrough in science here, and then they move to another university and get the Nobel Prize. Last time it was Arvid Carlsson. He made dopamine here, and then he moved to Gothenburg University and got his Nobel Prize. So I've told the deans and all the faculty, now for the future we will do the other way around. We will recruit people who made the research breakthrough on the list to Nobel Prize, and then they come here and get the Nobel Prize. And then we go up in Shanghai, and then we might believe also in Shanghai ranking. This is, of course, to say two things: to have some distance on all this type of ranking, but also, in fact, to tell you that one part of the strategy of Lund universities is, in fact, to have humor. We think it's promoting quality, to have a good time, to have fun. So I hope this seminary will also be some funny things and relaxed things. Before I came here, I was in fact the first Director General when Vinnova was started, the Swedish Agency for Innovation System. And in fact, there's a link from Vinnova to Circle. And that was not only for Charles was very active and when we was forming Vinnova, and he told me that I have to listen to him. He was the one that had all the papers, so please come. And he was so telling me so many times, so I had to meet him, and I read his papers. So and he influenced some partly of the thinking of Vinnova. And one very important thing with the relation between Vinnova and Circle and other centers of excellence studying innovation systems was in fact that we needed to have the policy based on science as long as possible. And I think this is crucial for policy making, that you try to learn as much as you can from social sciences and the one who studies innovation system. And I think this is very important, that you always go on learning and finding as good instruments, but also you are free to do experiments and learning from all over the world. I'm happy to see Jan-Evert Nilsson here, because he taught me one thing that I never forget. And he was one of my professors when I was running Blekinge Institute of Technology. And he said, most things happen elsewhere. And that's, of course, obvious. Most things in the world happens where you're not are, where other people are working. And then he said, when you find good things out there, and you want to do the same. Never copy. Translate to your own context. So for instance, when we learn from Israel the incubator system, we translate that to Swedish context. When we learn the ISBRR program from US, we translate to our context. So thank you, Jan-Evert, for advising me that you have made quite an impact on me. And then I think also that very important for a university to take part in innovation is in fact that if you see the future now for the world, it's not only big challenges that can be solved by public-private partnership. It's very much in the knowledge-based economy, public-private university partnership. And that's what you can call triple helix. We need to be a part from the university. And that means, of course, that we have to take part in the policy for the society around the university. And we have also to listen to challenge from outside. And in fact, we have tried to do our best in our region. So we have formed, for instance, a research and innovation council in Skåne, and it has been working fairly well. And we do policy together with all the municipality, the region, and the business sector. And we have been able, in fact, to transform when AstraZeneca laid down 900 people here. We transformed that to Medicon Village by working together. And today it's more than 1,000 people working there in AstraZeneca, former site in Lund. And also the transformation in telecommunication, ICT, we have been handled together. And it's impossible that it's only one who solves a problem. But of course it's a lot about also important people, but it's about people that cross borders. And in our strategy, for the Lund University, it's very much about cross-border cooperations and cross-border in discipline. And then internationalization also is very important, and of course leadership. But the most important, if you look at impact of society, you know me, some of you, I'm very much, of course, for innovation, but and we try to do that better and better for our university. But the most important is in fact the culture of the university. So when we make strategy for the future, where starts and where's the strongest impact from culture in a university? Oh, that's in fact where the leading scientists are. So we look into our centers of excellence at Lund University. We have something like 30 that are top in the world, or almost top in the world. And if these groups, with high-ranked professors and researchers, if they take part in innovation and they take part also in education, they are also changing positively the culture of Lund University. And also I think communicating good examples. So for instance, we have a history here with a very good interplay between engineering and medicine. So we have the company Gambro started from here, a professor, Alval, who joined forces with a rich guy from Tetra Pak, Crawford, and they made Gambro, and the first artificial kidney. And then we have a number of examples using, for instance, ultrasonic in medicine. That was Helmut Hertz and Inge Edler. And this goes all the way up to today, and you see good examples, and you see this interplay with the business sector. So for instance, we have also Bluetooth, small distant communications around mobile telephone and equipment. That's also an innovation from Lund University. So we try to keep on that, but you always have to be moving. We have the oldest and biggest science park, Ideon, but we are now talking about transforming it a little, because there are many around Ideos that also take part of this very good name, Ideon, and we will try to include them, and we have a concept we call at Ideon. This only to say that everything that is of life, living, it's always tried to grow and to change. So I'm very much looking forward now to the panel, looking to the past, and look into the present, and look into the future. And as you know, I've done my very best to support to Circle, and that's an important think tank, not only for Lund University and for our region, but for Sweden, and also I think international, and this is very important, not only for learning but also for giving out, so to say, the gospel of innovation. Recently today, we have a 2-week education program in building innovation system in Indonesia. We have a group from Indonesia, 25 people from government and business sector, and in fact, since we have been there a number of times, they think that Sweden is a good role model for Indonesia. They have 250 million people, and we are 9 million, so it's not so really comparable. But I think there are things to learn from one another, and we could learn from them the way of changing, the way of learning, and we will now try, and I hope for the future we will join also a number of forces between one and to see countries and regions that are growing. You learn a lot, and you know, when you have been a peer review for something, then of course you are learning quite a lot because you know the subject, and we are looking forward to the panel here, and we're looking forward to getting more and more international. So I'm also very happy to see Silvia Schwarzenegger, who is in head of Vinnova's strategy for internationalization. So be most welcome, and I'm also proud that you are a joint professor at our university. So thank you very much, and now we go to the panel, and I was told that Björn should start, so please, Björn.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Per. In the panel, we have sort of agreed on some sort of division of labor. You find it from me. So I will start because originally I initiated Circle, but I will focus most on context and framework condition, why it did happen in Sweden, and I think that is interesting and has some sort of bench learning perspectives for international participants there. But I also think it is important for local and national actors to note what kind of decision was successful. And remember that, because there's no reason to believe that what was successful in the past cannot continue to be successful. So I will go into that. Just very, very short, what I call a prehistory of Circle. I call myself the initiator because Vinnova advertised a planning grant for making application for the Center of Excellence. That was in November 2002, and I applied that. It was only 100,000 kroner, and I got it. Then we made a group of 5 persons from Lund University, and then Jan Evert Nilsson also from Blekinge to work on the application. And we got funded, ranked first in June 2003, and then it took 1 year to establish Circle. Charles was the first director, I was deputy director, until he stepped down, and then I was director for a bit more than 1 year and 3-4 months before Ron took over. So that was that. But then I would sort of focus on context and framework conditions. I have sort of a comparative perspective on that, not explicit often, but I'm thinking about why this couldn't happen in Norway, why it happened in Sweden. So in addition to the academic strengths and entrepreneurship of the founding fathers, you need something more. You need a support from the society around, from the university and from agency like Vinnova, and you need some sort of very positive context condition that you find in Sweden. So I will praise Sweden today. I can do it because I'm a Norwegian, I'm not a Swede. So you couldn't sort of accuse me for being a chauvinist. And as I said, I think it could be an international sort of bench learning perspective for other people and also for people involved in the decision making. As Per said, he was the first Director General for Vinnova. And Vinnova, like Tekes, is very important because it is really important to have a coordinating agency that are responsible sort of broadly for nearly all innovation activities. Then you can see clearly the benefit of that compared to Norway, that in addition to sort of using less money on R&D and innovation, is very, very fragmented. So the effect of that is even less smaller than the small number should say. But in addition to being the main responsible agency for innovation policy in Sweden, Vinnova also has a function as a research council for innovation research. And they're funding basic and applied research from social science to science and technology. And this sort of advertisement in 2002 that they wanted to fund a program on basic social science research and innovation system to improve the analytical capacity of Vinnova, as Per said. And this is a good example of the long-term program thinking that has been characteristic of Swedish innovation policy, at least since the end of the 70s, and which is also sort of highlighted in the very good OECD report on Swedish innovation policy that was published last February. I mean, that should be a compulsory read for everyone interested in innovation, and also really sort of document why Sweden is a country to look at for learning how to sort of orchestrate a good innovation policy. Very important for Circle has been that it's possible to get continuous funding for basic social research. That's something that is not available in Norway, and that's one of the reasons why before moving back to Lund, I was involved in similar thing in University of Oslo, but agency funding innovation in Norway are all applied. The innovation part of Research Council Norway is applied, and Innovation Norway is applied. So there's no systematic long-term money for funding basic research. Then you have Lund University. As Per said, I mean, it's the largest university in Nordic countries. It's very old, and it behaved really exemplary with strategic leadership. Strategic leadership is more and more necessary in the international competitive world, also universities. I mean, Per talked about the ranking of universities, and of course you have to have a distance on it, but it matters, especially if you want to recruit students and talent internationally. And to really achieve that, you need strategic thinking. And that was demonstrated because Vinnova requires 50% matching funding. We got 3 million from Vinnova. We went to talk with the Vice-chancellor at that time, Bexell, and Peter Ronett. And after half an hour, they said, "We believe in you. We will give you everything in cash," which is highly extraordinary. Normally, all university gives little in cash and mostly in kind. Without this strategic decision, without getting everything in cash we have got since then, and promised at least to 2016, but hopefully longer, similar funding, because we need that, we wouldn't be able to go for this Linnaeus grant, the grant for Center of Excellence that was advertised in 2006, because it enabled us to hire new researchers, 3 postdoc and 3 PhDs, that together with the founding fathers gave us some sort of critical mass so we could go for that. So you can see how this strategic decision of deciding to give everything in cash is a very important explanation why we have been growing to become one of the 3 largest research centers of innovation in Europe. I mean, university leadership should learn from this. And this sort of strategic leadership has been characteristic for a long time now for Lund University. I hope sincerely it will continue under the new Vice-chancellor because it makes a difference. Per talked about that they have 30 centers of excellence. In addition to that, it's sort of a good evidence that there's not a contradiction between scientific excellence and doing the third task, also regionally. Because Lund University has also been very successful in commercialization. And some of my colleagues at Circle did this study to find out what kind of researchers, which researchers did commercialize. They found out that the best researchers, the most cited, with most publication, with most external funding, was also the one that was most eager to commercialize. This, of course, has a bit to do with professors' exemption in Sweden, which boosts academic entrepreneurship. As I said, this co-funding from the university gave Circle the critical mass to go for a Linnaeus grant. And this sort of Linnaeus grant was a very sort of interesting experiment because the Research Council decided that universities could apply, not researchers, not research groups. And universities was giving a quota to apply for. Since Lund is the biggest one, they got the highest quota. So there was an internal university competition. This is interesting, but this was also a learning process for university to behave strategically. And Lund was obviously very successful because they got 40% of this of the first centers of excellence that was funded, because there was only international people involved, and the only criteria was scientific merit and the quality of the program. No geography, no gender, nothing. So Lund got 8 out of 20. Uppsala got 1 at that time. They have learned, they have become better. But that was really, really, really a catastrophe for them. They obviously didn't know how to do strategic thinking, you know, how to pick the best proposals. But the leadership of Lund University did do that. It pays off. And another interesting characteristic is that most of these first, at least, centers of excellence that got Linnaeus grant was interdisciplinary. This is not the common trend in all countries. In Norway, for instance, there's still a strong tendency. The center of excellence is disciplinary. So I doubted also that Circle would have had a chance to get similar 10 years basic research funding in Norway. So this is another important context condition. Then finally, and I think it's this is more sort of political statement here, you know. I think I could be allowed to do that, also looking at it from inside and outside. And this is a bit sort of important now because you have finally got some negative tendency in Sweden also with right populist parties growing, that Sweden is an open society. It's still the most open society in Europe. And I say I'm not Swede. I call it the only civilized society left in Europe in many ways. And I mean it strongly. It's easy to be a foreigner in Sweden. Okay, I'm not that foreigner, but still, one is welcomed and integrated. And I think that's not only my experience. I think remember Circle has nearly 70% are foreigners. I think it's a common experience that Sweden is very welcoming and you are integrated, which is important. So that makes it easy to recruit foreign talent to Sweden, for instance, in contrast to the country over the bridge that have chosen to go another way. And this openness towards foreigners, I think, will become increasingly important to remain competitive in a globalized economy generally, and not the least specifically to building global excellence in research and higher education, to be able to compete for global talents. And I think it's important to sort of emphasize this in this political climate today. And I think that also part of the success of Circle, that we've been able to do that. But I leave the floor then to Charles to go more into detail how we built excellence, research excellence at Circle. Thank you for your attention.
Lionel, will you help me?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Thank you, Per. Thank you, Björn. I will provide some, I will not give a biography or anything of Circle. I will provide some snapshots that I think capture important events, moments and processes in the development of Circle. And out of that I will try to refine some pillars that were important for creating and developing Circle. There will be some news. I will say things that have not been said in public before, because I think we can also learn from such things. And I'm not the director any longer, so I can take some freedom. Björn stressed the interdisciplinarity, and that's extremely important. I think when I stepped down as the director, we were 12 disciplines represented, and as many nationalities. That's a very, very important thing. But I will also mention when I came to Lund, or came back to Lund in 2003, that's 1 year before Circle started, then I was appointed to the Ruben Rousing Chair in Innovation at the Engineering Faculty. And I started to build up a division of innovation there. And it was an extremely smooth and easy process. There was money from the Rousing Foundation, and the engineering faculty, they were extremely interested in getting work done in innovation. For example, I took the initiative to start a PhD program, and it was created within weeks. Sometimes things can be easy. And there was no problems whatsoever. That is a background which I will come back to a little bit. Björn has already mentioned that Vinnova was extremely important, and it was interesting, Per, to hear that you say that you started this program on innovation systems research because you wanted really policy to be based in analysis and science, and I think that's a very good initiative of yours, and let's hope that it continues. There was a planning grant from Vinnova, and then I was asked to be some sort of a figurehead in continuing that process, and we wrote a full-scale application. There were 9 groups in Sweden that aspired to get long-term grants, and the proposals were evaluated internationally. This matching funding was also interesting because Vinnova expected the university to pay half, and we then decided to go to the university leadership, which at that time was Göran Bexell, who was the president, and it was Peter Honeth, who was the chief of staff. And Göran Bexell, he was brand new, and we had 30 minutes at the office of the university president, and I presented the draft application, and when time was running out, I said that but we also need 18 million crowns. And there was a moment of very, very tense silence in the room. I think my colleagues remember that. And then I think that since Göran Bexell was very new, he didn't know about the budget and so on too much, I believe. But of course, Peter Honeth did, since he had been the chief of staff for a long time. And I think I saw that the president looked at his chief of staff, and the chief of staff did like this. And we had the money. And that was very important. And we are now talking about the support from the top leadership of the university, which is crucial. Then we started to employ people. There was a lot of enthusiasm among the personnel. We got a lot of other smaller grants, and everything was very exciting. And I think that one of the important reasons for the success of Circle is that we went for excellence and simply tried to avoid nepotism and village politics in the appointment processes. So we always formulated the job descriptions widely, no shoe numbers. We announced the positions globally. We got many applicants. We used international evaluators, and we followed their advice. And incumbent at Circle did not have any advantages. And then you might think that, well, you just followed the book of rules. And I said, yes, but not too many people do that at universities. There are a lot of nepotism and village politics. Stressing competence also meant that we have never taken gender aspects into account when employing people. Only competence and qualifications. Still, the gender balance is fairly good at Circle now, and it has improved a lot since we started. So it is possible to make progress on the gender balance by exclusively going for competence. I think that is important. Pardon?
Except panels here.
Yeah.
We have to improve.
A small thing. I think that might look small, but I think it's not. And it was that actually the design of the structure of the annual report, I think, was important. I mean, for details, we have the annual report here, and anyone can read it if you have the energy. But they played a role, because in the report, there are records at the level of the individual of all publications, all citations, or raising of external grants, and all teaching performed by everyone at Circle. Of course, performance is the crucial thing, but it is also necessary to be able to monitor performance. The people in software metrics, they say that what you cannot measure, you cannot improve. And that is true. But the content of the annual report also clearly shows to all Circle researchers what were the objectives. I mean, excellence in research and teaching, basically, and how that should be operationalized. So the director, at that time me, did not have to repeat these things all the time, because it came every year in the annual report. And here I can say in passing that there are many units at Swedish universities, research units, that do not have detailed annual reports, even at this university. And I don't think that's a good thing. And I don't think I have this about citations. I think that I have never seen any other research center anywhere that publishes the citation data for its researchers. Okay, as a director, I tried to be present. I limited my travel. I tried to be active as a researcher all the time, and I failed in the end, and therefore I stepped aside. But I was also, I think, sometimes a quite authoritarian leader. And Circle had an advisory board, but I kept the formal power myself, which is possible, or at least was possible, as one of the modes of government of the center at the university. Of course, I also listened to advice from the board, from the advisory board, and from many of the researchers at Circle. I mean, it was a political process, of course. At one occasion, I think that some degree of authoritarian leadership method. Because when we got the money from Vinnova, there was an idea coming up that we should share the catch among the founders of Circle and simply forward the money to the people and department that had collectively been attracting the money. I had a different view. I wanted to make Circle a strong organization as such, which is its own momentum and with as much independence as possible. So we had different views about this in the advisory board. And without knowing for sure, I suspected that I was a part of the minority, together with Björn, in the board. My way of handling this was to decide that the advisory board should have a number of additional members. So I added some of the new Circle employees to the board as members of the board. And there are several reasons for that. The first reason is that I have never believed that universities are only formal democratic organizations, and not even that they should be. Of course, there was a strong case for including the new employees also in the board of Circle, and not only professors that also were professors at other departments. And as a consequence, there was a majority for building Circle as an independent and strong organization. By the way, this is the principle that is also used in the boards of firms. Once they are appointed to a firm board, the person is supposed to be loyal to the company and not to any other organizational units. Another aspect of, and I'm jumping from large to small things here, but all are important, I think. Another thing was that Circle, we decided that Circle should not be a virtual organization, but that it should have a physically existing office building, also in this current world of virtuality. Some of the other free innovation research centers founded by Vinnova did choose a more virtual solution. There is more to say about that, but there is not time. But there were differences in strategies in this respect. An issue related to this is the one about how Circle should be placed in the Lund University organization as a whole. In the very beginning, we decided to place Circle in what was then called the 9th faculty, which was not a traditional faculty. It was sort of a residual of units that did not fit in the 8 big faculties, or units that did not want to fit in the big faculties, because they considered themselves to be vulnerable or interdisciplinary, or there were other arguments. And this is what I pushed for Circle. I had many discussions with you, Per, about this over the years. I also believe that you were under quite strong pressure from the faculties to not have these freewheeling units floating around. And I realized that I have been considered to be very, very stubborn on this issue by some people. But I strongly claim that Circle could not have had developed into the successful center it is if it had been forced into a faculty at an early stage. I still claim that that is true. But everything has an end. there are disadvantages of not being a part of a big faculty. For example, Circle does not have its own PhD program, mainly because of this. And remember that it took weeks to create one in the Division of Innovation within a faculty, but it has not been possible in years outside the faculty for specific reasons. I believe that the discussions going on now about how to integrate Circle in a traditional faculty are coming at the right time. And I think maybe Ron will say something about that later. The faculty question became acute again when the research funder in Sweden, the Swedish Research Council, decided to open the Linnaeus grants. They were extremely attractive, large, long-term, and there was a quota, as Björn mentioned. At the Division of Innovation at the engineering faculty, I applied for the Division of Innovation to be able to submit an application. It was not granted with the argument that we were not good enough. And this was a result of an internal evaluation within a faculty. Again, I contacted the leadership of the university. This is number 2 again, becoming important again, and presented the problem. And the leaders, still Göran Bexell and Peter Honneth at that time, they decided to use the one and only slot they had to grant a permission to apply for Circle. And in the end, Circle was one, as Björn mentioned, of the 20 research groups that was awarded a Linnaeus grant. So it was proven that we were good enough. In writing this application, I also want to mention that the International Advisory Board was extremely important, and it has also been important in some other occasions. Okay, this was a second example of how in the evaluation of the Linnaeus grants, no Swedes were involved. It was only international evaluations. And that has been very important for Circuit in the Vinnova case, in Linnaeus, and also in the evaluation of all research at Lund University called RQ08. So for a new entrant, it is important that there are outsiders who are evaluating. That I think some of the examples here indicate that that is the case. And also we got support from the university leadership a third time, and that was also before your time, Per, when after this debacle about not being allowed to apply, the conditions at the engineering faculty never normalized. So again, I went to the university leadership and asked to move Division of Innovation to Circle, and they supported that. And this also facilitated life of the director of both these centers, of course, only one of them now. But to finish this, the ultimate way in which I have facilitated my professional life is not to be a director of any center. which I am now. Thank you.
Thank you. So, give the floor to Ron. Yeah.
Where is it? Ah. All right. Thank Charles. Okay, also looking a bit at the schedule, I have to talk fast because of course we are also very eager to listen what Meric has to say on Circle. So I was, let's say, given the assignment to say something on the future of Circle, which of course is always an interesting question, and I think what scholars always in innovation studies tend to emphasize is that the future is completely unpredictable. So, but of course, having said that, of course the future is also laying in the past. So it also means that to say something useful on the future of Circle, you have to go back in history and indeed see what type of assets are around at Circle and to what extent we can fully exploit that also in the years to come. And again, of course, we cannot say anything right now or about what Circle will look like in 10 years from now when we will celebrate our 20th anniversary. I'm sure we will celebrate that one, but who knows in what shape Circle will be in that respect. But I will just outline a number of issues that I think are quite relevant in that respect. Of course, also looking at the success of Circle and why it has been so successful in the past, and how we can fully exploit that more in the years to come. First, of course, what is quite crucial, of course, for every organization is that you have excellence. I think Charles already talked about that quite in detail, how important that is, and indeed, that's what I really like about Circle, is that they always went for excellence. And did not compromise on that. And that, of course, is quite straightforward. But I think when we look at Circle nowadays, you really can see that excellence is present. And I just look at the number of schoolers, senior schoolers with a tenured position that are around at Circle. Well, not all of them are tenured, by the way, but most of them are, and it's really an impressive list, right? If you go through those names, they all ring bells, quite well known, and they're all part of Circle. So I think that is, I think, an extremely important asset. Of course, also the type of research we are doing. Of course, innovation studies is by definition interdisciplinary type of research, and we have many scholars with various backgrounds, and we are really able to combine those, which of course from an innovation perspective it makes quite sense because it leads to original research questions and novel type of approaches. Also, the quality of research, I think, is also shown in the number of publications. Of course, is quite arbitrary, right? Just to count the number of publications, because in each publication there's really a content and there's really something happening. But of course, when you just look numbers, and I just made a figure over here, you can see that indeed, especially as far as academic publications in journal articles are concerned, it's really on the rise all the time. Also, what I think is important to stress here is that we are extremely successful in acquiring external funds. And of course, we heavily depend on those as well, because funding from the university, although substantial, is still not taking the largest part of our budget, to put it like that. But I think we have been very successful in acquiring external funds. Just to give an example, where only in 2013 we managed to get 22 million Swedish crowns of external grants. So I think we are really doing a good job there. Of course, as you I think you're all aware of, is that also Circle has a unique research profile, has been very strong, of course, in innovation studies, has made major contributions in the past, and of course we are still conducting research in that particular field. And a systemic approach to innovation is, let's say, kind of common thread in most, if not all, research that is conducted nowadays at Circle. I just put some examples. Of course, you always have to be careful in providing examples because you miss out many. You can never give an exhaustive list. But we are really doing that very seriously, and I think that is really contributes to the unique research profile we have at Circle. We have 5 research platforms which are outlined in here. Globalization of innovation networks, or globalization process more in general, coordinated by Christina Gaminade. There is a research platform on skills and strategies. It's more economics of innovation. It's led by Martin Andersen. There is a research platform on sustainable transitions. It's really making a lot of progress in most recent years, led by Lars Koene. There is a really good platform on entrepreneurship studies, led by Asa Lindholm-Dahlstrand. And there's one on innovation systems and policy, a lot on regional innovations in particular, which is led by Björn, but also Charles is very active in that respect, also with respect to his research on innovation policy. And so I think that is one of the major assets of Circle, having such a big and critical mass within an organization, and really to make crossovers between those research platforms really work very well. And that's why it's also so important to have that critical size and to keep it at that level, because it is really a unique asset that not many research institutes can say in that respect. We also try, of course, to address research topics with high societal relevance. Well, I think the conference we organized today bears witness to that. We really try to embed our research in all kinds of societal issues as much as possible. And last but not least, we have evaluations now and then. The last one was done by Vinnova, and there we got excellent evaluation. So in that sense, you might say the future looks promising, right? Of course, having success in the past gives no guarantees for success in the future, but of course we also know that those are not those two things are not completely disconnected. So, well, something about the challenges that are ahead of us. I just mentioned a few of them here on this slide. There are many more, I can tell you, but of course I don't have time to go into too much detail in that respect, so only having 10 minutes for this presentation. But of course, in all the 5 research platforms, there's a lot of new research going on, and of course, again, I don't have time to go into detail. I think what are promising areas of research is to try to make more link between the innovation system approach and a network approach. I think there's a lot to be gained in that respect, because the two types of literatures have really a lot of new insights, but making them more integrated, I think could be very helpful and might lead to new insights. Also, we would like to address more than before how innovation policy really operates in practice, right? And look at that from an academic perspective. So that means that we also need to work more with political scientists than ever before, because I think, and that might also be discussed today at the conference, that if you want to say something useful to policymakers, you also have to understand how the policy process really works and operates, and in order to influence it. Another area where we are really expanding right now is on sustainable transition research. We are really pioneering a lot of research there, especially the research on the geography of transition. So applying transition research in geography, that is still a lot of work to be done there, a lot of open research questions that can still be addressed. So that is also a very promising area of research for the near future at Circle. Of course, Charles already mentioned that one of the main challenges ahead of us is that we have to again become part of a traditional faculty. Because, as Charles said, for long there was a strategy to expand Circle outside a traditional faculty for good reasons. But now we have entered a stage that we really want to become integrated in a traditional faculty for various reasons, and we are quite close to getting an agreement with the Faculty of Social Sciences here at Lund University. So we hope we can be integrated with them. Well, there are a lot of benefits to be drawn from that collaboration or integration. One is already mentioned by Charles, is that we can establish our own PhD programs in innovation studies, which is important, of course, because innovation studies, as you know, is an emerging field. It is an expanding field, but it has hardly any home base. So it's really important to build up this international community, and therefore you need PhD programs in innovation studies, and Circle really want to contribute to that and implement that PhD program, and that will be made possible when we become part of an established faculty. And also important is that we have plans to reactivate our master program in society, science and technology, which under the consortium of ESST. Another issue, of course, which is always very prominent in managing Circle, is how to secure funding also for the near future. And of course there is a changing funding context, I think, in Sweden in that respect. And it's, I think what Charles nicely said is, okay, asking for money and then people not, and then you have the money. I think it's, and I'm not saying that that was easy, but I think the situation is more complex than ever before. And for example, if we look at strategy of Vinnova nowadays, they were very keen on supporting those centers of excellence, of which Circle was one. But you now see that they are clearly moving into more project-based funding, which of course it's still unclear in what direction that will go. If it is project funding concerning big projects, then it's fine. But of course, if you have to compete all the time and write applications for short-term projects, you might run the risk in turning into a kind of consultancy business, and that is not what you want. So that's quite a challenge. But there are also other funding agencies in Sweden that provide a lot of basic funding, like Riksbanken. In fact, we are preparing a few of those at the moment. Another challenge I think ahead of us is to try to attract and keep excellent and committed young scholars. It's not always easy to offer them a bright future within Circle as far as tenured positions are concerned. That is a major problem which we have to try to deal with as much as possible. And And last but not least, one of the challenges to contribute to knowledge creation concerning the key societal challenges. And there's, I think, still a lot to be gained in that respect, also in terms of research that we are carrying out at Circle. And therefore, it was one of the reasons behind organizing this conference and having this focus on societal challenges, so that indeed we can explore more in detail where we can contribute and how the future research agenda might look like and how a Circle will fit into that. So I think that was my last slide. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Please. And take your time, so.
I'm up at the top somewhere.
On the top?
The fourth from the top. There we go.
There.
Yeah.
Okay, please, Meric.
Well, good morning. It's a real pleasure to be back here at Circle and back at Lund University. So Per, thank you for your very warm introduction earlier. And let me just echo what you said by indicating how happy we are that the connection between the University of Toronto and Lund University is very strong and likely to get stronger in the future. And I believe that this relationship will survive the succession in leadership here at Lund University. So it's really fun for me to be part of this panel because I've been, I guess, part of the discussions leading to the creation of Circle and in shaping its evolution for some time, more than a decade. And I guess the sort of bottom line from my presentation today is that Circle itself has been a successful innovation, which I think is a good thing for an entity that's supposed to be studying innovation. Hopefully you do it well yourself. And I would say that Circle has indeed been a successful innovation for many of the reasons that have already been talked about this morning. By the way, my slides say confidential discussion draft. That's what happens when you work in the president's office. Everything that you produce seems to have these disclaimers on it, but don't pay any attention to that. And I'll explain the subtitle a little bit later on. So in my comments this morning, and I will try to be brief given the time, really I'm offering a perspective on Circle and its evolution, its success, that comes from, I guess, the two different hats that I wear. First, as a scholar working in the field, someone who, although I'm based a long way away in Toronto, has had kind of inside-out status here, given my long-term association with Circle as a member of their International Advisory Board, as a sometime co-publisher with Circle faculty, as an opponent on several PhD theses that have come out of this university. But also as a senior academic administrator, a former dean of one of these faculties that have been talked about, or at least, you know, a counterpart at U of T, and now as president of the university itself. So let me talk about the first perspective and looking at Circle as an academic enterprise. And here I would say that its scholarly achievements are based on the unique niche that it occupies within the field, where the goal has been to understand the dynamics of innovation in the learning economy, and to do so in a way that really draws from multiple disciplines, including those listed on the slide here, and you've heard the previous speakers comment on this. So I think that this multidisciplinary structure, which was created by design, was very, very important in creating the conditions for success at this institution. One way of capturing it is by looking at the collaboration network. So the various fields depicted here are research areas as defined and categorized by Thomson Reuters and used to analyze publications in the Web of Science database. Gives you a sense of the the disciplinary and interdisciplinary interactions. Obviously, you can see the centrality of geography and business and economics and public administration, but also government and law, engineering, environmental sciences and ecology, computer science, education, and information science and library science. So rather rich set of disciplines that are part of the activity that has been supported by and indeed encouraged by Circle itself. I would go a little further in describing the unique niche that Circle occupies and talk about the importance of its geographical lens, which I feel is really a signature feature of Circle's contributions. The way that its scholars approach the study of innovation and learning from a resolutely geographical perspective. And really, I think the central premise that has motivated a lot of the work at Circle has been that one cannot properly understand innovation and learning without accounting for its geographical dimensions. When I compare Circle to other major research centers in Europe, for example, and there are a few that stand out, I think this is one of your most marked differentiating features. However, one should not regard this sort of geographical lens in very simplistic terms. Indeed, the idea here is that innovation generating activity has a very distinctive geography. It's one that's becoming more accentuated over time and more concentrated over time in a relatively small number of places. And it's this sort of dynamic that I think many people at Circle have been trying to understand, and leads to some very important questions that have guided a lot of the work that has been undertaken by scholars here. What are the characteristics of those places that are successful in attracting or generating innovation-generating activity, including the nature of localized learning dynamics, the structure and composition of social networks, the kind of importance of history and evolutionary paths, the role of key concepts like variety, whether related or unrelated, the institutional architectures that shape these evolutions over time, and various aspects of quality of place that have a primary impact on the geography of innovation. So these are core geographical questions related to understanding innovation better. But at the same time, I think scholars here have also led the way in helping us conceive of a more sophisticated, a more nuanced understanding of this geography, which accounts for non-local relationships and networks that complement the local. And I think this is really important. In other words, people here have really led the way in helping us appreciate the distributed or the distantiated features of the innovation process in an increasingly globalized world, helping us to understand the conditions under which non-local learning is not just feasible, but indeed critical to the success of the innovation process, as well as those conditions that dictate when it is not feasible. And it's equally important to understand this critical distinction. So I think that this additional sophistication has been one of the really core contributions of the group here. Okay, so let me switch hats now from scholar to university administrator and ask the question, how do you know when a research center is truly successful? This is a question of obvious importance to Per and his successor, and it's a question that I have to grapple with all the time when I'm looking at how we allocate resources within the university. There's some obvious answers and some less obvious answers. So I would mention really three things. The first one has been much commented on already this morning. The success that a research unit enjoys in attracting research funds through the most rigorous peer-reviewed competitions. That's, I think obvious. Perhaps a less obvious point is the success of a center like Circle in attracting grants that transcend individual projects, grants that support the development of an integrated, a more coherent research program in which the whole is clearly greater than the sum of its parts. Again, if I look at the way Circle has evolved, this has been critical to its success and has been a part of its DNA right from the beginning. So obviously, on that criterion, a big check mark beside Circle. Second one, again, is kind of obvious, research output and impact. These are, the kind of traditional metrics that one would use. And I know these have been important here at Lund University. The number of publications and their quality, which we can measure in a variety of ways, the quality of the venue or the journal in which they are published, the ability to attract citations and all of those things. But also I would add to that the success with which people based here are publishing with scholars at other great institutions around the world. And I think that here too there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the people based here at Circle have been very actively engaged in these global collaborative research networks. Let's see if this map actually works. Okay, so here's one way of capturing this. Don't take the location of the dots too literally here. Those are countries, not necessarily cities. I think we got the location of Lund more or less right, but everything else is a national geography rather than a metropolitan geography. So this is again, looking at Web of Science co-publication, and each line here represents at least one collaboration, i.e. co-publication in the Web of Science, spanning some 125 publications and connecting 19 countries. And we know that this, if anything, this undercounts the amount of collaboration going on. But you can see, obviously, an intense network of collaboration within Europe, but also crossing the Atlantic to Canada and the US, as well as to Asia. A lot of action to Japan, to South Korea, to Thailand, to China. So very much embedded within global networks. This is quite a compelling picture, I think, of the extent to which research activity here is very much connected to and set within global networks. So the third criterion for success would be the success in attracting talent. In other words, the drawing power that a center has. And here I think Circle has really succeeded. And this has been commented on already, I think, in passing by some of the other speakers. The ability to attract great faculty, postdocs, graduate students. I think that is evident, as Ron indicated. Global dimensions of this are quite important. So, I think the success with which Circle has been able to attract a rich mix of scholars and students from around the world, I think, is quite a significant indicator of its success. But also locally, its ability to attract and to engage faculty from across various different departments. These are people, after all, who could quite happily just stay in their departments doing what they're doing. But instead, they've decided that they want to commit some of their time to building up this interdisciplinary research enterprise in a new place. So they have voted with their feet. They've allocated their most precious resource, which is their time. So as a university administrator, that to me is a sign of great success, right? Where people say, I want to be there because interesting things are happening there, because I can do things at Circle that I can't do somewhere else. So that is a really critical sign. So I guess the conclusion is that Circle has indeed been very successful, that it is clearly generating great buzz, and its success, its drawing power demonstrates the value of being there, the value of being at Circle. That is expressed both by local scholars who have contributed some of their time to this venture, and also by its ability to attract scholars from around the world, either working here permanently, people like Ron himself, or people who are here as visitors. So, the problems that we study through the lens of innovation, I think, are increasingly interjurisdictional and global in terms of scale, and also interdisciplinary. And they increasingly require exactly the kind of analysis that Circle has been conducting for now a full decade. And indeed, it's this kind of globally networked but spatially grounded excellence that continues to distinguish Circle and set it apart from the competition. So if I look to the future, I would say that I would summarize it as sunny with cloudy periods in terms of the forecast. So the sunny part is, that this is now a really well-established center, and there's this kind of dynamic and momentum, a kind of initial mover advantage, a first mover advantage, which I think is really now compounding on initial investments. One should comment on the fact that this is a very strong circle, a very strong center established within a very strong university. So that point cannot be overlooked and cannot be emphasized enough. It's really, really important that you have a strong university base. The third point is that you are close to a major metropolitan region. Per mentioned that, your international airport is Kastrup, right? It's Copenhagen. And this is a huge plus. It makes it easy to get here. But also, the proximity of Copenhagen and the establishment of the bridge across the Øresund makes it so much easier to take advantage of that major metropolitan region. And as Björn said, it's easy to be a foreigner here, right? So you have the best of both worlds. You have the proximity to a major metropolitan region and airport, international airport, but you also have a very open context, right? An institutional context that makes it easy for people to come here and to settle here. So all of these things, I think, augur well for you. The cloudy periods part, I think, really is exactly the points that Ron was summarizing in his last slide. And if I was to maybe underline one in particular, I think, the sort of most interesting challenge for Circle will be to figure out what the next big idea is that's going to drive Circle's research agenda as it builds on the successes that it has accumulated over the last 10 years. And perhaps I'll stop there. We're already 10 minutes into coffee time, so thanks very much.
Thank you.